I'll grab some other people outside and come back in and get started soon.
You need some batteries? Oh, okay. So which one is channel 1, 2, 3, and does it go 1, 2, 3, and 4, or how do you have them lined up? Right?
There's logic, but it changes every time. So
Okay.
yeah, to look at the people to know which one to do.
Yeah. You just look at whoever's talking with the red light.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you put all these on the same level like this.
Yep.
And then you turn them off.
Sure.
And when someone speaks, you turn.
Turn it around. Yep. Gotcha. Makes sense, man. Three. Yeah, it was 3 right there.
Okay. The camera is recording.
Yep. Okay.
Just leave it there.
Just leave it there. I got you. One mic not working?
I don't know if this guy's working. Can you get it? Did you turn it on?
Go ahead. Yeah, it's working.
You can hear it.
Two.
Good?
Can you hear it on the speaker? Yeah.
That's number 2, right?
I don't know, I guess.
Channel 2? Yeah.
This is we got on channel 2. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. You said if it starts to get squeaky, just turn it down.
Well, the channel
Or you can tell me stop it.
Hello. Hey, everybody. So I'd like to start off today. Welcome you all here to our event. So this is the biggest event that we've had in BPEP, and today is a special day because we have a collaboration between PIEP and BPEP. So I'm Mark Klein, one of the board members for BPEP, and I'll be your MC for much of the night here. And it's great that so many people actually got here, showed up. We're trying to do some different things here. So the Berkeley Postdoctoral Entrepreneurship Program, and we're really aiming to foster entrepreneurship amongst postdocs and graduate students in the Berkeley community. It's something that's often overlooked, entrepreneurship amongst postdocs, but it's something that we actually have the skill for. We can look at a basic problem and expand that and build on science to solve a problem and build it into a company. And also PIEP, the Postdoc Industry Exploration Program, is here to foster and help postdocs and graduate students navigate the hardships and the career choice between working in industry and working in academia, helping to diffuse some of that tension on that decision. So I definitely want to give a big thank you to the BSP office, the Visiting Scholars and Postdoc Affairs at UC Berkeley for sponsoring these types of events. Sam is here tonight. He's here and ready to see how we're doing here with our first collaboration between PIEP and BPEP, and I think we've done a great turnout. He's waving. So our speakers and panelists, of course, have generously provided their time and effort to come give us some information and knowledge about how entrepreneurship and hiring and working in a company is when you first start. So I appreciate their efforts to come here and give us free information, taking their own time. So again, I mentioned this as a special event for a couple of reasons. One, it's the first collaboration between PIEP and BPEP. Two, usually our events focus on the entrepreneur, but tonight we're actually got two focuses. We're focusing some on the entrepreneur, but even more on maybe the first employees who join a startup, those postdocs who just get their first job and move right into a career, and what you should be looking for when you join a startup as well. And thirdly, this is our first career-oriented event. We actually have startups here, 10 startups. They're ready to go, hiring people, and they want to meet you today. So you have to get out there and network with them. That's the best way to get your foot in the door. Just have them see your face so they know who you are. That's all you need. Just say hello, don't be scared. So we'll get on with it. So thinking about founders tips, we have David Kern speaking. We have panelists that will talk about employee tips, which you should be looking for when you join the company, and potential places that can lead to a great start for your career. And most importantly, as I mentioned, connecting. So at the end of the event, we'll all connect together and network. So let's start real quick with some intros. I do have to have one company is going to jump in here really quick and present their quick 1 to 2 minute pitch about their company. He's got a very important meeting he's got to run to. So I will let Gabriel go here real quick with a quick pitch.
Thank you, Mark. Hi, my name is Gabriel Lopez. I am founder of Synvivia, and we make biocontainment technology for engineered organisms. This is really important because recently, an engineered probiotic that treats obesity in mice was developed, but it was not tested in humans because there was no way to turn it off, no way to contain it from spreading to, let's say, a baby or a pet. So that's bad news. My company solves this problem by making on-off switches for engineered organisms. We use chemicals like ibuprofen to turn these switches on or off. And by installing these switches into an organism, we can turn the whole organism on or off. In this way, if an engineered organism malfunctions inside of somebody, we can switch it off with a pill. We can also engineer these organisms to be dependent on a synthetic small molecule, so that it will only be active if the patient consumes the activating pill. This is genetically encoded biocontainment. Our technology allows the genetically engineered obesity probiotic to be used in humans, and we just got a grant in order to get it to human clinical trials. But it's not just obesity. There's a lot of other diseases that live engineered organisms can be used to treat. Cancer, malaria, pain, depression, all of these diseases can be treated with live engineered organisms, but not before we have on-off switches to shut them down if they misbehave. So if this sounds interesting to you, I'd love to chat. I have to run right now. I have a couple of flyers on the table outside. I'm looking for protein engineers. That means people that have a lot of experience building DNA libraries, running selections, screens, and a lot of cloning. As far as personality characteristics go, somebody who's tough, mentally tough, because startups are tough. Someone who is creative, resilient, but most importantly, tenacious. Hope to hear from some of you soon. Thanks again, Mark, for accommodating my schedule, and an excellent rest of the evening.
So he's a long-term attendee of our events, and so it's good to see. I remember first day incorporated, he was so happy when he ran in late at the end of one event. Just came in and said, I incorporated today, jump up and down. That's the entrepreneurship journey that we can see here going.
Thank you again. Take care.
Okay. So we will get on to the event, a little bit of introductions now. All right. Okay, we got a little bit of a reasoning issue here. Okay, so tonight's speaker we have David Curran and we also have Laurel Fetter. So David Curran is going to speak first, and he is the ultimate entrepreneur today. He's going to tell you all about what you should really worry about when you start founding a company, how you're going to build a team, what kind of employees you should bring in. So David Curran is a biotechnology entrepreneur, a physician, and a scientist, and he's a leader in the biotherapeutics R&D. He's co-founder and CEO of 4D Molecular Therapeutics, a leader in gene therapy, vector discovery, and development. He received the Johnson & Johnson Entrepreneur Innovator Award. He was founder and CEO of Genrix Biotherapeutics, a pioneer in oncolytic immunotherapy for cancer. At Onyx Pharmaceuticals, he was the first development employee and VP of clinical research. He co-authored the first clinical development plan for sorafenib, the first targeted agent approved for kidney and for liver cancers. He consulted on biotherapeutics R&D at Biogen IDEC, Novartis, Bayer, and countless others. Dr. Curran held faculty positions at UCSF, Oxford, and Imperial College London. He's co-authored over 100 publications in peer-reviewed journals, and he actually earned his BA here at the University of California, Berkeley. He got his MD at UCSF, internal medicine at Harvard Medical School, and oncology fellowship at UCSF. So let's welcome David Curran, and let's hear about his journey and what we should do when we hire employees.
Let's see if we can fix this.
Great. Set an alarm here. Look over.
All right. Well, thanks, Mark, for that introduction. Can everybody hear okay? Great. Okay. So what I thought I'd do today is just give you a little bit of introduction about my background, my journey, and how I ended up as a biotech entrepreneur. I thought I might then switch gears and talk a little bit about what are some of the roles that each of you could think about playing in biotech, because it may be broader than you realize at this point in your career. And then finally, I thought I'd talk a little bit about the hiring process from the side of the company to give you a perspective of what the company is looking for when they go out and recruit and interview and hire folks like you. So as Mark gave a very kind introduction, thank you. I think, importantly, I'm currently an adjunct professor here at bioengineering, which is quite recent since I last showed my bio, so I'm excited about that. And obviously, as a Cal alum, it's wonderful to be back here. So in terms of the ecosystem of biotech and the sorts of positions each of you could think about targeting in the course of your career, it's much more varied than I think most of you realize at this point in your career. You get a lot of exposure to what an academic career looks like. I assume one of the main reasons you're here tonight is because you're yearning to know more about what industry jobs are out there and what they look like. So, the most obvious extension from your postdoc work and your PhD work is to go into R&D. But even within R&D, there's discovery phase, there's small molecules versus biologics. In biologics, there's antibodies versus gene therapy vectors, oncolytic viruses, and antisense, and many more. Beyond the discovery phase, and there's really what we call preclinical product development, and that's really taking a discovery concept and trying to mold it into a product. And that really requires a vision of what the actual approved therapeutic in patients should look like and working backwards. So that's an area where, again, a PhD, well trained at Berkeley, you'd be amazed at how many different things you can do just within that development piece. There's preclinical pharmacology, toxicology, biodistribution. There's assay development, biological assays for both predicting response and assessing response to novel therapeutics. And then there's all the kinds of studies that allow us to file an IND, which is an investigational new drug application, which is what allows us to actually treat humans with these new experimental therapeutics. So I think just within R&D, open your mind and think about all the different parts that go from discovery all the way to that drug going into a patient or that therapeutic going into a patient. And think about all the steps along the way. There's just amazing opportunities there for someone with a PhD from Berkeley, regardless of what you focus on in your PhD or your postdoc. But there's opportunities beyond R&D. There are things like regulatory affairs. Having a PhD and really understanding the underpinnings of the science gives you a huge leg up when you go to FDA and talk about the pharmacology and toxicology required to get a product into the clinic. So many of the regulatory affairs folks I work with had a very intensive scientific background, either master's, PhD, or beyond. There's also business development. Business development, you may, in a larger company, maybe surveying the world out there, what technologies are out there, what product opportunities are out there that we want to in-license to empower our scientists or build our own product portfolio. Conversely, with a small company, you may be looking for a pharmaceutical partner and understanding which each of these partners, what their programs are and how your technology, your products might integrate well with what they're doing. So a lot of people that I work with in business development, the best ones have a deep scientific background and understanding of the technology. So those are just some examples. The other is for the engineers in the crowd is manufacturing. Biologics manufacturing is an amazing, fascinating, creative place where you actually take, again, this concept of a product, but you actually manufacture, purify, formulate, and vial the actual product that's going to go to the clinic and actually go into a human being, which is pretty amazing. And so there's all sorts of different opportunities there in terms of process sciences, coming up with the discrete unit operations to manufacture a complex biologic. There's process development where you link all those unit processes together, and then there's the actual manufacturing where it's all about quality and reproducibility. There's also analytical. Anytime you're manufacturing, you need to have a wide array of analytical tests that you do on the material. So developing and testing those assays is also another very important part of the drug development program and requires deep scientific understanding and scientific creativity. So hopefully I'll give you a sense for what's, the opportunities that are out there and that it's maybe wider and broader than what you think. I would say, if I were to give you advice, is get into a company and do your job very well, which obviously you're all going to do, but keep your eyes open and learn as much as you can in your free time about the other aspects of the company, what other people do, because you might find in 5, 10 years, you may want to peel off and go into one of those areas instead. And most people in their career, at least in biotech, will wear many different hats and not just sort of stay in one area, but they'll branch out and try new things. So hopefully that's helpful. Now, hiring from the company standpoint. So the company, you've got a vision, you've got goals, you say this is what I want to achieve in the next amount of time, and based on how much money you have and other realities, you say, okay, here's our hiring plan. For each of the hires that you want to make, you need to develop a job description, which should be quite detailed in terms of the technical capabilities a person needs to have, the things they need to know how to do, either in the lab or in a legal document or computer skills, and have that laid out. And I think it's important to have the requirements, what these folks must have to be considered, and then what's nice to have. So nobody's going to be the perfect fit, but here are the things that are non-negotiable, and then these are the things that we'd like to see in somebody, everything else being equal. So that's how we write our job descriptions, and I think it's important when you apply to a position, try to understand what's a must-have and what's a nice-to-have. And then the other issue that should be laid out in the job description is who does the person report to and who reports into that person. And that will determine what sort of managerial skills the person needs to have. So that's important to look at as well. So beyond the job description technical pieces is the cultural fit. And when we interview folks, they shouldn't even come in the door if they don't already have the technical capabilities. So for me to sit there and interview them, in terms of their lab capabilities, is a bit of a waste of time. They shouldn't be in there talking to me if they don't have those. So if they made it to the interview stage, I tend to spend more time focused on the company culture and what we're looking for. So I'll give you an example with 4D. We have an acronym that we have called the Inspired Quest, which is basically outlines our corporate culture. So the first I in Inspired stands for innovation. We want people who are innovators. We want people who are creative. So when I interview, I don't ask someone, hey, are you creative? Kind of obvious how they're going to answer. But I ask, give me an example of a time that you ran into a problem, a hurdle that you didn't expect, and tell me how you addressed that and how you were able to overcome that problem. Because it requires much more thinking and piecing together the strategy they use, and I think it really fleshes out whether somebody's innovated in the past. So are you going into an interview, I think about that. Or what are a couple of examples that I really want to get out? And I'm going to find a way in my interview to get it out there, no matter what the question is almost, to say, here's how I problem solve. I think it's really, really important. The N in Inspired Quest is for network. It's really important to show you work well with a team. And biotechnology companies are very much a team sport. It's a little bit different maybe than your PhD where you're kind of a lone wolf and you're driving your own thing. You collaborate here and there, but biotech is very, very integrated. And so knowing how to perform well on a team is critical. Even examples where you've gone above and beyond what your job description was to help somebody else out with their work, I think is a question I ask a lot, and I think tells you whether somebody's really networked or not. The S is scientifically driven. Obviously, everyone here, I believe, is scientifically driven, but just showing how you've made decisions in the past based on scientific data, even if it flew in the face of what you thought the data was going to tell you. Showing that you have an open mind and you let the data drive where you go rather than having a preconceived notion. The P is for passion. Biotech's really hard. I mean, there's a lot of hard fields, but it's hard. Getting a drug designed, engineered, manufactured, through all the preclinical pharmacology testing in humans, with all the regulatory hurdles and getting it all the way to market, it is a very steep climb, and there are lots and lots of times where you drop the ball. So I think having somebody who's really passionate, the previous speaker mentioned toughness. I think those go together. If you're really passionate and believe in things, you're not going to get down, you're going to keep fighting through. So I think that's critical. The next I we have is for integrity. That goes without saying that you want somebody who's got high integrity. One of the things about integrity is, to me, integrity is sort of what you see is what you get. It's honesty, but it's also sort of being who you are and being comfortable with that and letting that come through in an interview. I think the worst thing you can do in an interview is try to be somebody you're not. And so just be yourself and let that shine through and be confident that you're worthy of the position and let that shine through. So I think integrity is a big one. And then our corporate culture of respect is super important because we question each other a lot. We challenge assumptions, and you can't do that if you don't have respect and trust. So I generally ask some questions in that direction as well. And then the E and the D are for efficiency and decisiveness, and just showing how you're able to make decisions and move on and not kind of perpetually reevaluate things. And again, the questioning is, we like to question assumptions. So I frequently ask people, give me an example of where the majority thought one thing, you question assumptions, and you were willing to push your point and really get people to look with a new lens at that problem and open up their minds. I think that's, again, a huge advantage having employers willing to do that. So that's sort of how we approach the hiring from the process standpoint. We get the job description out, we advertise it, we have an HR specialist screen those, and try to screen out anybody who just doesn't have the minimum threshold of technical capability, and then anything that makes it beyond that. Generally, the hiring scientist or individual will review those and try to narrow that down to a handful and then present it to a group, and then we'll come up with a short list of the folks that we want to interview. And then, depending on the level of the hire, it may be a short list that they interview with or a very long list. So if it's an entry-level RA or something, research associate, you might just have, a couple of team members plus the hiring manager do the interviewing. If it's a more senior position, you might have them interview 10 different people in the course of a day. So that's what you can expect there. And then I think our next speaker is probably going to speak to negotiating the actual contract. Is that right? So I need to touch on that a little bit, or what they can expect in terms of benefits. And yeah, great. Okay. Good. So I don't think you have to hear from me on that. So maybe is now a good time to maybe open up to a few questions, or do you want?
It's a very good time for questions if you have any real quick.
Okay.
So you said that you won't physically interview someone who doesn't meet the minimum technical sort of requirements. I've also heard that an applicant shouldn't be afraid if they don't meet all of the listed requirements. How should we sort of balance that?
Yeah, what I should have said first before I said that is I make those technical requirements pretty low because I feel like smart people can learn things really fast. So I'd much rather have a really motivated, smart, energetic person who has to learn a little bit more than somebody who has 20 years plus experience but is low energy and not passionate. So I make those bars pretty low. If you don't meet the minimum requirements, there's no reason not to apply, but I think you need to sort of apply through somebody at the company who can vouch for the fact that you're a quick learner and explain why you can catch up quickly. But that's a great question. Another question over here, I think. Question?
So when you take the resume,
Yeah.
which one do you pick afterwards? Like what is your recommendation to us, to postdocs? What to present in our resume? What we have to say such that it catches your eye and gives you the opportunity to understand that we are smart, that we are skillful, that we can quickly learn.
Let's put Berkeley at the top. I think about that. That's a big one, honestly. Something like that is a shorthand for so many different things you had to do to get there, to get to a place like Berkeley and get a degree here. It says a tremendous amount. I think having a very brief summary up at the top that says in a very bold point what sort of position you're looking for, what kind of worker you are, what are your key technical skills. So it's a sort of executive summary at the top. Make it shorter is better, I think, less is more. All you're doing with your CV is you're getting your foot in the door. You're trying to get that first meeting. And then at the first meeting, you have to be prepared again with examples. I don't think people like to hear a laundry list of what you've done, but more examples of problem solving, examples of innovation, examples of being really networked with your colleagues, of going above and beyond, examples of being knocked down and getting back up again, those sorts of things. And I think the other thing to really remember is energy is just huge. You know, when you walk into a room, if this person is energetic and positive, it counts a lot. You just want to like them, you want them to succeed in the interview. I think if they suck the air out of the room and you're like head bobbing, it's hard, no matter how good they are, frankly. So I think high energy is important.
Right. So let's save a couple more questions for the panel, maybe for David at the networking session. We do have a pretty big window here, so I'm going to have to have the next speaker come up. So we have Laurel Feather, who's an attorney at Gunderson Denver, a leading Silicon Valley-based law firm that represents emerging companies and venture capitalists. So Laurel's practice focuses on compensation issues for emerging companies. Prior to joining Gunderson Denver, Laurel was an attorney at Baker and McKenzie. Laurel and Gunderson Denver are one of many Silicon Valley attorneys and law firms that provide legal support to Berkeley entrepreneurs through the Startup at Berkeley Law Initiative. Let's welcome Laurel.
Hello, I'm Laurel. I, again, work at Gunderson Denver. We are sort of focused on startups, so we have a lot of experience guiding startups in how they can compensate and encourage people to stay with them when they don't have cash. So, as David said, once you form your company, you need to hire people. And a lot of startups are sort of cash strapped. So there's other incentives that you need to provide to get people to want to join you versus some large public company and stay with you. So initially, the way that so I'm going to talk about a couple things. Mostly stock is how you get people to stay with you, because the opportunity later for that to be worth a lot is what they see as beneficial. So most startups, you either want to go your goals usually are to go public or to get acquired, and that's when your stock shoots through the roof and people get the value that they were promised for all of their hard work. So when you form your company, the founders, which would be you guys, sort of contribute the IP in exchange for stock in the company, and that's how you own the company. And so when you bring new people on, you clearly value the stock and you show them similarly, look, this is a value aspect of your compensation and we're willing to share sort of our money and our ownership of the company with you. So a lot of startups don't have a lot of cash on hand. Usually the way you initially get cash is through series financings, which is when investment companies come in and give you money, again, in exchange for stock, which is usually of different classes, and they have different preferences for how much money they get when you're acquired or when you go public. And so once you start getting financed, you usually have a little more cash to pay people, but you never know how soon that's going to happen, how much money you're going to get at that time, how much preference those people are going to demand in order to get some cash, so how much you're going to lose value in your regular common stock. So up until that point, to compensate people, we usually grant something called stock options. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. When I started, I had no idea what they were. So what it essentially is a right to, in the future, buy stock in the company at a specific price. Presumably, stock raises in price over time. So when you are able to exercise that right and buy stock, you're getting a good deal. The way that stock options generally keep people around is that they have to invest in them in order to exercise and buy those shares, which is usually tied to service. So the standard sort of Silicon Valley startup vesting schedule is you vest in 25% at a 1-year mark, and then you vest incrementally in equal installments monthly over 3 years. So it's a 4-year vesting schedule before you're fully vested in your stock option. So intended to keep people around for 4 years. Doesn't always happen, but the first year almost always keeps you around because otherwise you get nothing. And then once you leave the company, you have a period of time after that when you can exercise your options and buy those shares. And then you still keep those shares when you don't work there anymore. And when the company goes public or is acquired, you still benefit from the time you contributed to the company. So that's the most common way that people in startups are compensated. And so it has the advantages of you don't have to put forth any money at the time, and it incentivizes people to stay, which can be hard in the Bay Area when there are a ton of tech companies, a lot of which have gone public, a lot of which have a lot more cash on hand, and if that's what people are looking for, you can't really provide that. Another aspect of compensation obviously is the cash. So you're not going to be able to hire someone just by saying, here's a stock option, come join me. You're going to have to give them some sort of cash so they can live their lives. There are a couple other ways to compensate people with equity. One is called restricted stock. That either is granted in exchange for services, which means employees don't pay anything for it, but they do pay taxes on the value of that stock. So people don't like that as much because you don't have a choice whether or not you exercise that. So if you don't want to be subject to tax on all of these stock that you may or may not want, you'd prefer to get a stock option. And I would say 80% of startups do stock options versus restricted stock. They'll do restricted stock a little bit more for executives who might have the cash on hand, but for your rank and file people, you're not going to generally be giving them those. There's a couple types of stock options. There's one called early exercise and one where it's installment exercise. So like I said, it vests generally over 4 years, and you can usually only purchase it over those 4 years. If you have an early exercise option, you can exercise for as many of those shares that you want to purchase at the time they're granted, but the company then has the option to purchase them back from you, which may or may not be at the price you paid for them, because if their stock goes down, which it does, you aren't going to get the same investment that you put back into the company. The reason people will early exercise is because you can file something called an 83B election, and you start the holding period at the time you exercise for capital gains, which is a 2-year period. So if you do decide to leave the company after 2 years when you vest in that 50%, you're going to get capital gains tax when you later are able to sell the shares when the company again is acquired or goes public, because there's not a market at the point of a startup where you can actually sell those shares, so they're illiquid. So that's sort of the benefit of early exercise. There's also 2 types of options that are sort of taxed differently.
Sorry to interrupt you. So a lot of people here are fresh out of school, PhDs and postdocs, trying to get into startup companies, trying to get jobs there. So if you can please address them as what should they be for in terms of compensation, how to negotiate, and what are options? I don't think a lot of them know vesting and options. So if you can please elaborate a bit, that would really help.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So when you guys are negotiating to get a job, if you have a stock option that doesn't have a standard for your vesting, you should question that. Because that, like I said, is standard. If you really want to try and negotiate, you can negotiate for the monthly over the entire 4-year period and not get the 1-year cliff, but you probably won't win that, just to tell you. But you should expect, honestly, to be underpaid for what you're doing. I see all the time what people's compensation is for the positions that they're in, and if you look at that for a public company, it's a lot higher than what you can expect to get. On the flip side, you usually have more responsibility. You can really build the company, and it's sort of more rewarding in that way than the cash that's in your pocket. So it depends on what you're looking for. It seems like all of you guys are here because you do want to build something from the ground up and be a part of the core company. So that is sort of what you're giving up when you're giving up cash in exchange for these stock options. Another thing you can negotiate is for them to try to keep you around, is that if you are terminated, your vesting accelerates, and so you then have the opportunity to buy even more shares. So you may leave either of your own discretion or because the company terminates you, and if you still think the company is going to be successful and you want to invest in it and have stock in it, then if you negotiate for acceleration and you can buy, say, the entirety of that stock, you know, that's a great benefit for you. That again that's not as hard, I think, to negotiate as it is to get your 4-year vesting monthly, mainly because people aren't hiring you with the intention of terminating you, so they're not exactly worried that that is going to kick in. And usually it only kicks in if you terminate voluntarily for good reason, which is like a big reduction in your salary, the company moves 30 miles away, the company is lying to you and be really rude, you know, whatever. So that's another thing that you should think about. It's kind of not great for you guys, but there's not a lot you can negotiate with a company that just doesn't have a lot of cash on hand. If you are terminated, the company is usually going to make you sign a release, which means you can't like disparage the company, usually can't share any of the knowledge that you learned there, and in exchange for that, they will give you either cash or stock. I personally would go for stock because I really think, I mean, I've seen companies exit, whether it's getting acquired or going public, and these people make a fortune just because they're acquired by, you know, I don't know, like Salesforce, I guess that's not a good example for you guys. But some big like Allergen or one of those other like medical companies whose stock is sort of through the roof compared to you buy your stock for $1. So that's really the benefit and why you should still take a position or negotiate for a position at a startup, despite the fact that you could go somewhere bigger. I don't know, does anyone have any specific questions? I'm usually on the company side rather than the negotiating side, so I don't know if there's anything specific that you guys want to know about negotiating.
Given the high failure rate for the average startup, what is a reasonable fraction of the company one should negotiate?
That's a good question. So the people that come in earliest obviously are going to get a bigger chunk of the company because they're taking a bigger risk and there's more shares that the company is willing to give out versus later when they're running thin on their stock. I would say you can expect to get like a quarter of 1%. You're not going to get a huge chunk of the company. It's very rare, and I should say, as investors come in, your stock is more and more diluted because the way that they're giving money to the company is in exchange for usually different classes of stock, Series A, Series B, Series C, that have a higher preference in the event of a liquidation, so that dilutes you even further if they have like a 2x over your common stock. But I mean, if you get 1%, that's insane. But so if you get a quarter of 1%, that's fairly standard. Your question?
I have 2 questions. What's the difference between an employee stock option and a regular stock option? And the second question was, do you always know necessarily how many options are out there altogether?
No. So there isn't sort of a set, there's a set number of shares when a company forms, but then they can do stock splits where they sort of increase the number of their shares. So the number of shares in a company is constantly changing. Like I said, when investors come in and they create an entire new series of stock. So you don't really know how many shares are going to be in the company at any time. A stock plan, which is what a company has to adopt in order to grant shares, will have a specific number of shares that they can grant under the options. So that'll usually only be a portion of all of their outstanding stock, but they can increase that at any time, decrease it at any time sort of thing. The board just has to approve it.
Does the employee know what percentage they own if they have one stock or one option?
No. No.
You should
Yeah, I was going to say, when you're negotiating, yeah.
Do they have to answer? No.
Yeah, when you're negotiating, you could say, and a lot of in a founder position or a very higher up position, they'll often ask for 5% undiluted, so you always will maintain a 5%. That usually is a founder or like someone coming in and putting a lot of money into the company, or if you get a really great CEO that you're super excited about that came with a ton of knowledge, that's the only way you can really negotiate and get that. And so employee stock options versus non-employee, there's certain securities laws that you have to comply with in order to grant stock options. Rule 701, it's just what it's called, is what you grant employee options under. And the only sort of other ways to grant stock options are if someone is an accredited investor, which means they have a net worth of $1 million, or they're a company. So you're, unless you have $1 million, going to be getting employee stock options. Companies in general, I think, try to always grant employees stock options under Rule 701. There are limitations, at which point you have to disclose additional information about the company to these employees that you might otherwise not want to disclose, like your financials and stuff like that. But that's a very high threshold. A lot of companies don't reach that. It's $5 million in total stock grants, which doesn't sound like a lot again for a public company, but when your stock is worth 15 cents, you're not going to get to $5 million for a long time. So, any other questions?
I'll just do one real quick before we go. So you gave an example of your stock when you're an employee could be worth a lot of money in the end when the company exits. Do you have any examples? Did they get 200K, 300K, 50K? Let's bring up some optimistic.
I'll
say they had a salary of 50K. When it exited, they had a boom 500K check.
So, okay, for example, I'll give you an example of a company that was acquired, well, is being acquired, can't say the name, for $800 million, which is a lot of money. Most companies exit like up to $200 million is a lot, that's a big exit. So if you're getting $800 million, you're getting a lot. These people purchase their stock anywhere from $1 to, I think the highest their stock was $7. They're getting shares in this new company that's traded on the public market that are currently worth $80. So you're making 70, like whatever I just said, $74 to $81 per share that you own. And in the beginning, you get a lot of shares because they're not worth a lot. So if you have, even if you only have 50,000 shares, which I say only, but that's pretty standard what an employee would have, you can do 50,000 times 81 and see how much your shares are going to be worth, which then, because they're on the public market, you can sell and take that cash. Even if you have a 200,000 or 200 million exit, and usually the company's stock in that case would be worth less, even if it's worth $20, and you bought a share for even $1 to $5, you're making $15 a share. You have even only 10,000 shares, you got $150,000 in your pocket. So depending on your exit, it can be really, really big or just big.
Thank you. All right, so let's prepare for the panel now. So we have a wonderful panel of people who have been through a startup, from first employees right through more seasoned employees. What's going on here, kind of stuff. But this is where you can ask the people right in there questions about what it is to work in a startup, how it feels, how they got into it, whatever you'd like to ask them. So the panelists can please come up, and we'll have some microphones here for you, and we'll field some questions from the audience. I have I'll ask one warm up, and we'll see if the audience is ready to go yet. If not, then I'll ask some more. Pretty on taste. It's a little bit long, don't worry. We'll get some beer soon. I'm excited about the beer. So we'll have fun. And then you can startups. They'll come and pitch out the channel, and everyone can see what each startup is offering in terms of what the company is and personality traits they're looking for. Do your speakers work? Your microphones work? June, how about you do your quick little pitch here? So notice there's something under her name, a bit.ly, you can go look at.
Should we just do an intro? Or
Yeah, just do an intro.
Myself too. I'm Gina Axep. I'm a PhD in chemical biology from Scripps Research Institute. And afterwards, I worked at a 70-person startup in immuno-oncology, went to a 15-person startup in automation, robotics, and CRISPR. Then co-founded a startup with 3 people. And then now I'm at IndieBio, which is a biotech accelerator program in San Francisco, where we fund companies at the very early seed stage at $250K with lab space and training for 4 months. And I wanted to invite you guys real fast. Underneath my name, there's a bit.ly link. We have an event on October 11th. That's a pitch night. And we have UCSF, Stanford, and Berkeley students and MBA students coming together to hear some pitches from our companies as well as companies that you guys are putting together as well.
Okay, go ahead and introduce yourself real quick. We can do questions if you want, or you can introduce yourself.
So my name is Sharon Hoover. I'm a scientist at Zymergen. So Zymergen is a, what are we at now, like 170-person-ish startup. I was employee number 23, so it's been really neat to see the journey of the company as it's growing quickly. Let's see. I did my PhD at Stanford in microbiology, then a postdoc at UCLA, and Zymergen is my first job. So I'm not all that far removed from all of you guys.
Hi, my name is Viviana Marulia Aguilar. A little bit about myself. Well, I'm a biologist. I did a PhD in biochemistry back in Mexico, and I started studying bio since then. And then after that, I did a postdoc at NIH in the infectious disease section. And after my postdoc, I realized I really wanted to go to industry, especially in a startup company where I can do many different things. So I applied for a job and I got a job, but this was in South Korea. And Shuragen is a startup company that they do oncolytic viruses. So I went there to lead the laboratory and the analytical team as well. So after a couple of years of being there, I decided it was time to go back. So I came back and I started working for the molecular therapeutics societies. And after that, after a year now, we start this new adventure in this new company founded by David Kern here. And the name is Ignite Immunotherapy. So we are just basically a couple of months starting with this company. So.
Great, thank you. So I'll open it up to questions now. I'll start with a really basic question. So, what would be your advice to a new grad looking to join a startup? What is your first set of advice you would tell this person in the audience today? Just anyone can answer. Whoever feels preempted to go.
You do have to have a startup mentality, and this is a question that I ask when I'm hiring, and it's, are you willing to take out the trash, really? Because you have to do it. There's no one else in the company to do it. You can't just, even though your boss tells you what you should be doing, you always have to be looking to optimize. You need to be challenging what they're thinking as well, improving upon different things, and doing the nitty-gritties, even if it's really, really mundane at times. And then I think you really need a lot of communication skills. In a bigger company, it's really easy to have talk to your boss and have your boss help you out with communication, interdepartment communication. But in a startup, because there's so few people and everyone is so critical, that you have to talk to them. You have to, any kind of problems that you might have, you have to be upfront about it and have kind of non-violent communication skills to, to alleviate certain problems.
So definitely, in my 2 years at Zymergen, I think I've done the job that I was hired to do for about 6 months of that. The rest of the time, it's exactly that. You're going to be doing doing all sorts of crazy things. And that's, one of the biggest benefits of working for a startup is you get all of this responsibility and you get to do so many cool things and things you never would have thought of. And the opportunities for doing that are so much greater at a startup than at a company that's more established. You get to actually build out the infrastructure for the company, which is really a very exciting process. And it's really neat to see the company grow as you grow with it.
Yeah, that's very good advice. In addition to that, I will add just that think about going in a startup, but think about what you really want to do as a scientist. Like every one of us is a scientist, and we are also thinking, what are the things that I will be doing that really are passion for me, that will really motivate me? Because if you find that you go into somewhere and you turn out, oh, the scientist it's not really something that I think I would like, but I have the skills, so I can do it, but it's not really, I don't feel motivated to do that. I think that will be very bad later on, because in a startup you have to, as we already mentioned, we have to do different things within the company. So I will just advise, think about something that will really motivate you, that you really want to do and continue to do that, because at the end of the day, that's what you will be spending your time doing every day. So.
Great, thank you. Does anybody have any questions yet from the audience? Okay, we have a microphone. We have it moving around. Okay, we'll pass you a microphone so everyone can hear.
So I was just wondering, how challenging is it to balance working at a startup with life events? Because while I understand it's exciting, I also want to know just what kind of hours you guys work in the first few months.
So I'm going to go with the usual scientific way of saying it depends. So if there's a project that's coming down the line, sometimes you'll have to pull some longer hours. But there really are ebbs and flows. And even at our setup, when there was just under 50 people, we had parents, we had people with other responsibilities, and one of the good things, at least at Zymergen and the other startups that I'm familiar with, that they often are willing to be more flexible with your work.
Yeah, again, echo that it really depends on you and how you manage your time. I personally can kind of blend work and life together, and basically at any given moment, what's higher priority. So if there's like a party for a friend I have to go to, then yes, I stop doing the work and go to that party. And if something's due the next day, then yeah, I'll stay up and work on that. So.
Yeah, I think that depends on everyone, how we organize. One of the things that it's very important, and company, you have a lot of deadlines that you have to fulfill and accomplish with that. So if you have to organize and plan your days really well. So usually, if you are very, very good at planning and organizing, you don't need to be there on the weekends. You don't need to be wasting your time if you don't have to be there. So as far as you are efficient and know how to organize yourself, I think that's very manageable to do.
I don't need a microphone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Again, I guess my question is a little more personal. Compared to academia, do you find it, more enjoyable? Like, do you have a better work balance? Is it better to deal with your boss than your advisor? Like, personally, what would you think?
It depends.
No, not this time. I love the industry. I actually find that the environment is a lot more more suited to my personality. So it's a lot more of a team focus rather than an individual project that you work on. And I have always gravitated towards team sports and come from a big family. So this idea of being a part of, so you know, at these startups, you're going to be working on problems that are bigger than you can accomplish by yourself. And that's part of the excitement and part of the coolness of it is that you get to have a really big impact, but from the framework that you don't have to be an expert at everything. So, you know, like you can come to it and you can bring to the table the skills that you are really good at and contribute there. And it's a lot of fun to be a part of that kind of environment. And the other side of it, I actually also really like having my research be impactful in a shorter time frame than is usual in academia. So I did my PhD in bacillus, which is a soil microbe, and I studied sporulation. And why do we care about that? We really don't. But in contrast, in industry, I'm looking at it and I can say, okay, well, you know, this project that I worked on, it has time scales of months to a handful of months to a handful of years. I can see the impact that I'm having, and for me, that's really, really rewarding.
So actually, to think about how we do the transition between academia to industry, what happened to me is that I was doing my postdoc and I thought that my work was pretty amazing and I was really happy with it. But I realized that probably it wasn't as impactful as I thought it was. My boss was very excited about that, but outside it was not going to have any real impact in the short term. So I really wanted to do something that I will have to develop and to see making a difference, like going into patients, changing my life, or saying something like that. So that was the main factor that made me take the decision I should go to industry and not stay in academia. And actually, I enjoy it a lot. There is a lot of challenges, but I think that there is, and personally, it's more rewarding that for me that doing something that I know is going to be contributing and changing somebody's life.
I totally agree with everything that was said. For me, I often tell people, especially early startup, it's kind of like, yeah, like a postdoc, it's kind of like academia, but you're doing it with a team. And again, you can use everyone's expertise. I definitely saw it in the automation robotics company that I was in. I was one of 2 scientists where everyone else were engineers, so software, hardware, and everything that they did was magic to me, and everything that I did was magic to them, and together we made really cool things. And kind of you mentioned that, oh, you know, what is it like having like a PI versus having like a boss? The founders of the company, has that dynamic different. I'm really keen about startup culture because you have to dedicate so much of your life and energy into this company. If it's a really toxic culture, that's not what you want to be a part of. You know, you're getting paid very little and all these disadvantages too. But at the same time, if the startup culture is good, it is like the best thing ever. It's kind of like a frat or kind of like just a really tight-knit club that you're a part of, and you have your own inside jokes and you reinforce everyone's energy. That can be very exhilarating, and a lot of great things can come out of that. So I'm very keen on and especially in hiring too. I look for people like, will they be contributing to our culture, or will they just be another hand in the lab and going about their day? Yeah, so the good point is, though, if you really don't like the startup culture, you can quit. So it's a little harder to just quit your PhD or quit your postdoc, right? So and then go find another company that has that culture that you like.
Those are great answers, by the way. Very, very good answers on your question. Really how it is.
I think when you mentioned, the different time frames, in academia and private industry, but when you're conducting research, sometimes, if you're lucky, you solve a quickly, but sometimes, some problems take centuries to solve, and sometimes, in academia, there's that understanding that, flexibility in time, sometimes not so, sometimes more so. But in industry, usually you're working on a very, strict time scale. So what if you have a personality where you think very deeply, but you take a long time? Would that kind of personality sink in the startup world, or there are people who are kind of slow and deep thinker and can still excel in the startup world?
Well, I think that I will say that depends. Depends on exactly what is the work that you have to do. Usually it's not just one project that you are driving, but several projects at the same time. And it depends also, depending on the startup, usually there is a goal that everybody wants to move forward, but there is, within that, there is different things that you can focus on. So I think that you can even start off being somebody who really think about to the problem. I think that that's very important, because it's really important that the things are done well and they are planned very well. Taking the time, sometimes you have the time, sometimes you don't have much time. So you have to ask yourself, what is good enough to do this? But of course, trying to have all the controls that are needed for the experiment, things that you cannot just, oh no, I'm not going to do that. Of course, you have to do the best that you can. But I think it's possible. But I mean, there is always a reasonable time to do things. So you have to work on that.
You'll actually be pretty surprised because, in grad school, you're so new and you're just learning how to do science and postdocs as well. I found that once I got into industry, a lot of my experiments worked, which was kind of crazy. So it was just like, over time you gain experience, right? And oftentimes when you are in industry doing one type of experiment or something, the more and more you do it, the faster, the better and better you get. And then because you are working in a team that's multidisciplinary, when you do come to a problem, you just pitch it to your team, and oftentimes someone will be able to give you a new perspective to help you. And again, there is that challenge of speed and the amount of money it costs to run the experiment versus how good the full experiment, whether you have all your controls and everything. Unfortunately, at one point you have to kind of balance the research part and just doing. So, and it's an iteration process too, right? You come up with a little bit of a hypothesis, you try it out. If it doesn't work, you go back to hypothesizing, and you just kind of keep going back and forth, and hopefully as fast as possible.
So deadlines in industry are definitely quite a bit harder than academia, and quite a bit more rapid. But that being said, it's helpful to have different types of thinkers on the team. So someone who thinks really deeply about the problem can be someone who contributes quite well to the team. So again, it's not like you have to be an expert at everything. You don't have to be both a deep thinker and somebody who's really good at managing deadlines. You have different personalities that come together, and in that team environment can really, each person can bring their strengths.
David, what do you think? David,
yeah, I agree with what everybody said. I think generally in companies, your time is money and survival is driven by how much you can achieve in a limited amount of time. So there's significant time pressure, but it's fun. I mean, it's really fun because you know your work matters and you know it's going to drive the survival of the company, so it's exciting. That having said, it's not as if you don't want deep thinkers thinking deeply about things in the background. It's just I think you have to be able to do both, especially at a more junior level.
What's the most common mistake that you see new hires make at a startup? What's the most common mistake that you see new hires make at a startup? What should we watch out for?
Well, our company has a snack shortage. The M&Ms are really dangerous.
I think the biggest thing is you have to know what you don't know and be more than happy to say you don't know it and ask for help. You don't have to be a hero. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to be overly confident. Just relax. You know how to do something great. If you don't, say please, explain to me exactly what you want. Get clear goals, clear expectations, and just stay with it. And I think that, to me, that's the biggest mistake I make. I see people make is sort of not appreciating what they don't know that they don't know, and then getting into trouble. It's much better to ask for help and guidance. And get very clear goals and expectations.
So for somebody who's just made that transition, there's a lot of jargon in industry that you're going to be unfamiliar with. Just say, I don't know what FTO means. And that it's okay, people are happy to explain it to you, but if you don't, then you're going to spend the first 2 or 3 months sitting there being like, I don't understand half the words that are coming at me.
What are your biggest fears when you transition from academia to startup world? You know, it's a whole different world. What are you really scared of, and what eased you into those positions and you transition from one company to the other one? You know, there's a lot of uncertainty going into startups. How do you deal with them, and how can the rest of them deal with it?
So I think it depends also the position that you are hired for. So if you start with a big position like leading a team, then there is a lot of differences. Like to be just a postdoc and have that responsibility under you. And one thing is, because also you have to manage people. And usually, as a postdoc, we have students, graduate students working with us, but it's definitely not the same. So it's really to have, if you are trying to train yourself for that, sometimes taking some courses. I don't know here in Berkeley, but at least at NIH they have a lot of different courses for management role or what is like business side. So you can try to get some more information from there and try to build the skills that you will need depending on the role that you will be doing once that you make the transition. So yeah, I would say it depends on the position that you apply for. Is what you can prepare for.
How about you, David? You've been through a lot of from medical school to research. What are you scared of before you jumped in? What prepared you for that?
Yeah, I think the thing about companies is most will make it. They won't survive, and they won't get the big exit. Most won't. And when you get in your first company, it's your first love, and you're so passionate, and people are so into it. And when companies have their first round of layoffs, it's devastating. Some of your friends are leaving. I think realizing, oh my God, we have 6 months of cash and we may not make it. It's terrifying. And then after you've been through it a couple times, like, okay, if this one doesn't make it, the next one will. And so I think you have to have you have to be totally committed to your company behind it, but you also have to be thinking about your career long term and understand that if this one, for whatever reason, the technology doesn't play out, but you did everything right, you gave it a shot. That's okay. That's how science works and how business works. You took a shot. VCs invested in 10, they get a hope to get 1 home run. Right? So you can't say, oh, we failed because we didn't get a huge exit. If you did everything you could, you worked hard, and the technologies didn't work the way you thought, that's okay. Move on. The next company will work. So I think that's what helps you get over that fear. But the first time, it is terrifying, especially if you're the one who was the founder of the company. You got all these people to invest and people to suspend their career other places and come work for you. You feel a lot of ownership and responsibility. There's a lot of sleepless nights as a founder and a CEO for sure.
You want to hear something positive? I mean, I'm trying to have a conversation here. Anybody can jump in. Did you come out feeling better after your first failure in your startups? Did you feel more learned than coming out of your postdoc? Is it worth just doing it for that experience? Anybody there?
No, you feel horrible.
Don't you learn a lot of
I
things?
mean, it's, no, in retrospect, of course, you can see the arc of your career. You say, okay, I learned there. Next time I did things differently, and you can appreciate it in retrospect. But at the time, it's horrible. You know? But you know, I've been lucky to be a serial entrepreneur and a serial CEO, and I absolutely feel that every single time I'm better. You know, you fix the mistakes, you learn, you get better and better. As long as you're improving and learning all the time, getting better, that's all you can do.
How many did you fail?
Define failure.
How many would you define as failure?
You're giving some good questions. Well, I've done 4. I've been lucky so far that the first 2 had exits and the other 2 were well funded and going. So I don't think it was an abject failure, but certainly I personally made, certainly my first 2 companies, you know, the macroeconomic circumstances and the view of certain biotechnologies went out of vogue and the market was very difficult. We had layoffs, we shrank down. You know, Onyx was my first company, that thing got down to 5 people. And then it was sold for $10 billion. And, you know, so it's like, it depends when you're looking. But, you know, my second company, we sold for $150 million, but, you know, a lot of people didn't make very much money. And, but we developed a great product that started a new field. So it depends what metric you're using. But absolutely, I look back and there's a lot of mistakes I made, like, you know, not appreciating the power and importance of your board. You know, things like that. Learning how to hire better. Learning how to not be too optimistic with goals and deadlines and kind of sandbagging a little bit with college investors. Things like that. You get better and better. So I don't think any was a failure because I learned in all of them. But I definitely made mistakes and hopefully learned from them.
Question there. Yeah. Good.
Let's do just maybe 2 more, 1 to 2 more, and then we'll get on to the presentations by startup.
So everything, it sounds like you guys really love your jobs and it's been very positive, but what's the negative? What don't you like? What do you really miss from academia?
Nothing.
You don't get to talk about everything. So in academia, one of the great things about academia is that it's a very open environment where you get to share intellectually with all sorts of people. And one of the challenges that I often have when I'm trying to recruit people to come work in the industry is that I can't talk about what I do, like with the details of it. And you know, it's like I think the stuff that we're doing is really, really neat, but I can't talk about the details which would excite the other person. So that's actually an area that I've found challenging.
The other thing that I will add to that is that after you do the science and you are already like, oh, I want to publish, that this is right, I want to go visit my work in the journal, so you cannot do that so fast. You will, but not just first everything you have to go through IP, and then after that the work can be published, but you just have to wait longer for that.
Along similar lines, it's just so much, like a lot of the companies have tons of innovation, right? A lot of the academic papers that are coming out, companies have tried that 10 years ago maybe, but you don't know about it, and that is really frustrating that, and especially as companies die, they, like all that knowledge is gone, right? And so for the greater good of society, we are losing a lot of innovation all the time, and that's really sad.
Let's do 1 more. There.
As a PhD or postdoc who's looking at startups, this is a hard question to get a perspective on because everyone is enjoying just one at a time. But do you see different kind of positions and opportunities in early startups versus mid startups versus kind of post Series B's? Are you still called a startup kind of opportunities?
So I've gotten to see kind of the spectrum. I haven't seen many, I've only seen one startup, but I've been through kind of the stages, and it's definitely different. You know, in the beginning when I started, I knew everybody. We were all crammed into one room, and we all hung out on the weekend, camping, and now there are people that I pass in the hall that I have no idea who they are. And while it's really neat to see the business grow, it is a little bit sad because you kind of miss the days where everybody was really, really like a tight-knit kind of family. That being said, I really like not having to do all of the work anymore, so I like being able to farm that out to other people. So it is, there are benefits and drawbacks to each stage.
I think one thing that I really appreciated is the second company I was at that was 15 people. While I was there, we grew probably to 20, but in that change, architecture started happening, right? You have teams and people reporting to people, where when we were 15, we were all just round table at the same table and everything. And you really see like why corporate hierarchy exists and how communication flows and how it can break down as well, right? So if you are thinking more of the management track, like I wished if I were to be more of a manager type person, I would probably want to be in a bigger company first to really understand how that's set up and really see that happen before I take that to a startup to try to create a startup. Whereas if you're just going to be a scientist, then you can definitely do the same science in a big company or a small company. I think as a manager, there's definitely a lot of scientists that made the transition into management, take supplemental courses or whatnot, but it is definitely very difficult to do it on your own when you don't have the right mentors.
Yeah, I would say that the different stage of startups, it is different. Like when you start and there's just 10 people, it's pretty easy. And you mentioned everything, you share everything, and then as it grows, sometimes you don't get to talk to everybody, and there is several teams, and then it loses a little bit of communication. Like you don't know exactly what's going on, you know everything, but besides that, I think that pretty much is, I really like the early stage, like when we're just a few people and it's pretty easy to communicate and make things easier, but also on the other hand, you can do the work and you have people with other expertise to help you out, and you get to learn also from that.
Okay, thank you. Let's thank the panel. Please, startups who are presenting, come on and line up to the side, and I'll just kind of quickly go through your slide, and when it pops up, you can come up and give your, hopefully,